The economy has been and will always be a major issue for the American voter, as it informs so many things when related to life expectancy and quality of life. And one of Trump's big promises during campaign was to improve the economy, decrease inflation, and get the American economy going back to a better, more sustainable state. And now it's actually growing faster than it would under Biden. As the U.S. economy unexpectedly surges 3.4% in third quarter, it's its strongest growth in 2 years. Now, this was unexpected. It was expected to be stay around what it was previously, which was around 3%, 3.5%, 3%. But it actually shot up a lot. And this is because of Trump's policies related to decreasing prices on like gas and decreasing regulation. And it's been effective. And it's helped a lot of people within the economy. You saw the decrease in gas prices, as I made a video earlier, where it was talking about how gas prices have gone down to, in some places, less than $2 a barrel due to the fact that there's been decrease in regulation and there's been more oil drilling. That's another thing. Another thing is deregulation on other issues like healthcare and other places that have resulted in the economy growing. Additionally, with a lot of these policies, it's improved the economy in so many ways. So let's continue reading the article and see what it has to say next. The U.S. economy grew at an unexpected 4.3 in the third quarter, the highest rate in 2 years, according to government report Tuesday. Vigorous consumer spending on services such as healthcare and products like recreational vehicles fueled the surge in the gross domestic product, which is compromised to the value of all the goods and services produced across the country for July through September quarter. Inflation-adjusted annual rate is 3.4%, marked a uptick of from 3.8%, a growth that was of the previous quarter, and beats analysis expectations of 3.2% growth, according to the economist polled by the Wall Street Journal. So basically, it beat expectations by a whole percent, as a lot of these economists were expecting there to be a smaller growth and a higher inflation due to the fact that there's tariffs being put into place, and that they thought that would increase inflation on a lot of goods. This resulted in a lower expectation than what was previously, and this resulted in them underestimating what the economy would do, as inflation did not actually increase that much, and it's actually been pretty good. Considering the fact that tariffs are there, and tariffs were expected to increase inflation. So an annual growth rate of 3.4% is really good, considering that we have these headwinds of the tariffs. So this is a awesome growth rate, and I attribute it, and it's mostly attributed to the deregulation and the economic policies of the Trump administration. President Trump took a victory lap in the wake of the report, crediting his tariff policy for strong economic growth. Honestly, I disagree with Trump on that. I think it's more him deregulating and doing more removing regulation and incentivizing more growth in the U.S. Now, tariffs could be part of that incentivizing growth. In fact, it's probably a portion of it. But it's not just that. You could have regulation actually has more effects on incentivizing growth, because if you have a regulation in the economy, it slows down companies' ability to build and manufacture things in the U.S. simply because they now have to follow all these extra regulations, which take extra cost, extra time, and extra resources to produce here in the U.S. So him decreasing some of those regulations means that they have more of an ability to actually produce things, and it's more of an incentive to actually manufacture in the U.S. than actually having tariffs. Although that is probably a factor, it's not the main part. Additionally, with tariffs, it does increase inflation. This is simply due to the fact that a lot of our stuff is manufactured in foreign countries, and because there's a lot of manufacturing in foreign countries, when you put a tariff on it, it increases the cost to send those products to the U.S., which then marks up their prices as a lot of companies try to pass that on to consumers. Now, some of those things you can't really do it with, as consumers will stop paying more, but still, it does have an inflationary effect. Okay, let's see. Tariffs are responsible for the great U.S. Economic numbers just announced, and they will only get better. No inflation and great national security. Pray for the U.S. Supreme Court. He wrote on Truth Social. New report. So basically, what he's referring to, saying pray for the U.S. Supreme Court, is that there's actually a case going on in the Supreme Court, basically debating whether the Trump administration can actually institute these tariffs and because in the Constitution it says the Congress and the House specifically have the power to do budgetary and fund the government, where tariffs are now another way that's outside. But previously, the U.S. Congress has delegated this to the executive branch in a previous law, basically saying you can do tariffs in cases of emergencies. Although I do not like the fact that you have these delegation powers. Under the Supreme Court precedent right now, the ability to delegate is allowed. So technically it would be allowed under the act where they say you can use tariffs in case of national security reasons. And that's a lot of the reasons he's had for these tariffs, because he doesn't want a lot of our manufacturing to be made in foreign countries, particularly countries that are more likely to go to war with. For example, China, Russia. It's mainly China there. But we don't want to have nations producing vital materials for the U.S. in case of a war. Because if they have to produce, if we don't have our manufacturing capabilities for those certain things in case of war, then we're going to be in a horrible situation in case of that happening. So that's why I think this is great for national security, like, for example, the tariffs. But I don't think it's responsible entirely for the economy. As again, I think there's other factors like deregulation. Additionally, it says also no inflation and great national security. Again, inflation technically has upticked slightly. It's been a lot less than what economists expected, but there has been a little uptick in inflation. Although it's a lot less than what it was under Biden. Still, there was an uptick. I believe over the last month it increased from 2.6 to 2.7. Things they expected it to go to like 2.8, 2.9. But that's still a lot less, and actually that's probably played a factor in the fact that the economy grew a lot more than what the average economist expected. So it does cause slight inflation, but I do agree on the national security part, improving national security. Having some level of manufacturing in the U.S. and having the manufacturing that we need in times of critical war, in case we have like a war with China, that is definitely needed. We don't want to be entirely reliant on other foreign nations for the manufacturing and for our resource needs. So I agree on the national security part. So let's continue. So, new report from the Consumer Department was delayed due to the recent federal government shutdown. That is true. It was delayed. That's why we've gotten it, even though we're like halfway through, actually more than halfway. In fact, almost done with the fourth quarter. That's why those numbers didn't come out until then. It's because it was delayed due to the fact we had the government shutdown, and the Commerce Department didn't have the ability to actually collect data during the shutdown, as that's one of the things that was cut. And that's resulted in there being definitely a delay in collecting some of that data. So that is definitely true that there was a delay. And that's why we're getting it now. The figures, also if you notice here, this is real growth. Disregard the 2021 stuff because that's just going to be the jumping up from the recovery from COVID. So you can mostly disregard that, even though that there's a 3% there. That is right here you can pretty much disregard it. So you want to analyze mainly the stuff from the 2022 to 2024. And you'll notice it's less than 3% for most of the time. In fact, it's pretty much always less than 3%. Except for like this one jump here. In fact, sometimes it was negative, and sometimes it was less than even 1%. So that's during the Biden administration. There was only one point where it even reached 4%. Where in the Trump administration, although we've had a negative quarter, still half of that was during part of it was because of Biden still, because that was also when Trump didn't get into office until mid-January, and a lot of these economic stuff take time to have impact. So his economic packages didn't actually take into effect yet. So if you look at, even if you add that one, it's still on average going to be higher than what it was for the Biden after the COVID recovery. Higher than the growth is higher than what it was Biden after the COVID recovery. So this is actually a massive benefit and a better economic situation than what it was under Biden, as you've seen more growth and better growth than what it was under Biden. The figures marked the first official government estimates of third quarter economic growth, though they are being reported as fourth quarter draws to a close. Consumer spending grew 3.5% in third quarter compared to 2.5% in the previous quarter, helped power the surge of GDP. That is a large increase. That's a 1% increase in comparison to the increase of the previous quarter. Now, consumer spending is a large portion of GDP, as it is the biggest out of the portions of GDP, which are consumer spending, investment, government spending, and exports minus imports. For the U.S., consumer spending is definitely the largest portion. So that 1% increase there, that affected the growth a lot. As that large of an increase results in a larger increase than what it would be resulting from a 1% increase in investment or government spending, as it's more of a percentage of GDP. So that definitely fueled it there. And it, as I said, helped surged it. But if you notice, 3.5%, that's actually less than the total. 3.5% is less than 4.3%. So that's actually not going to be, you have to have some other portion, either government spending, GDP, investments, exports minus imports. You need those to actually increase more. If you want to actually have a larger increase in government spending, you have to have those portions increase more than the 4.3%, because a 3.5% increase is not enough to go over the 4%. So much of that spending so you need to have more than that. So much of that spending came from upper income households, whose spending closely tied to financial markets. Yes, that's true. The economy, particularly the stock market, has done really well, and that's another thing under Trump. You tend to see a larger increase in the stock market, which is also a really good for the investment portion of GDP too, as that a better stock market signals more investment in companies and investment in the U.S. in terms of economic capabilities. So that is that's really good for that portion. Venture markets, which have seen record gains this year, noted Sung Won Sun, a professor of finance from economics at Loyola Marymount University. He called the report a pleasant surprise, but urged caution, pointing out the significant portion of the boost in consumer spending came from an increase in electric vehicle purchases ahead of the September expiration of the tax credits for them. Now, that is true. And that does actually signal that there might be a drop afterwards, but still, other portions increased too. It wasn't just the electric vehicle market. Adding another factor driving GDP growth was business investments in equipment and intellectual property, which includes a spending related to artificial intelligence. This category jumped up up at a 5.4% pace, according to Consumer Development. And this is actually the portion I was talking about, when I was mentioning that you had to have other categories grow a lot faster in order for there to be a 4.3% jump. And actually, in my opinion, investment is the most important part of economic growth. As if you have a larger investment, that results in actually more manufacturing, more stuff being produced in the U.S. Where consumer spending is more of more just spending by consumers, and that can be inflated easily through government spending increasing and giving them more money. So, in my opinion, investment is actually a lot more important in comparison to consumer spending, which it increasing at a 5.4% rate is incredibly good. Also, this might also be affected by Trump's tariffs too. Even though I don't think it's going to be a large portion, it might be, as one of the goals of this is to increase investment in the U.S. And tariffs are trying to result in a larger amount of manufacturing, more investment in products in the U.S. So that also might be a factor for it. And that if that is, then we're seeing a good effect from tariffs. We are seeing somewhat of a bubble in capital spending related to data centers, Sun told the Post. He still stresses that companies behind the investments, including Microsoft and Google, are financially strong, making the situation very different from the dot-com bubble in the early 2000s. It's not built on air, Sun said of AI investment. So that is true. A lot of the investment has been driven by AI. And if you also said it was also intellectual properties related issues. So it has been, and a lot of that is also related to AI. But the fact that there has been a large increase in particularly the investment in AI does mean that some of that investment might be inefficient because we don't actually know whether AI is going to be extremely effective. We've seen this massive increase in that, and it actually could result in malinvestment. Which is partially true, but I still think AI can have massive payoffs as it can improve efficiency and results in better work capabilities. I use it for research all the time. It can result in more efficient research. It can also result in better coding, as a lot of the time coders use it to build basic level code, and then what they do with that is then they just go in and edit it, making it a lot faster for that code to be built. It's better for research. You can use it for developing pretty much anything. In my opinion, that actually could be a good thing with AI investment. Also, he said that it's not built on thin air. So even if the investment's not very effective, a lot of times these companies are very, very stable. They make a lot of income from other things. So it's not like we're going to see a massive crash in the stock market. We might see some level of crash, but we're not going to see what happened like in 2001 because it's not debt fueled. You're not going to see all these companies all of a sudden failing, especially the major companies. So, as I said, it's not built on air. Some indicators in recent months have called the underlying strength of the economy into question. Jobs market has struggled, with unemployment rising in November to 4.6, the highest level in more than 4 years. That is also true. Although it's not a giant issue right now. For the resting unemployment rates usually around 4 to 5%. So it's definitely more in 3 to 4%. So it's definitely more on the higher 3 to 5%. I meant to say that 3 to 5%. So it's definitely more on the higher end in terms of higher unemployment rates. But actually, higher unemployment rates isn't necessarily a bad thing. As higher unemployment rates means that there could be more turnover, which that means that more people are cycling through jobs, making it meaning that they're searching usually for higher paying jobs too. Since a lot of times there's this thing in when you go in to find a job, if you actually leave a job every 1 to 5 years or so, you actually see a larger increase in staying at job. So unemployment rate's not actually having a higher unemployment rate is not always bad. It depends on how the economy is going. But if unemployment does definitely skyrocket to like 10%, then that's incredibly bad. But having an unemployment rate here is not necessarily bad. Additionally, it also could mean that there is more people actually going into the job market now. Because previously, one of the major issues under COVID and the recovery from it was the fact that even though the unemployment rate was lower, you still had a lot of people actually not working. You had them sitting at their home and collecting unemployment checks. So this is actually might necessarily not be a bad thing. Additionally, over this year, we've actually seen we've seen an actual increase in the number of jobs. So unemployment rate in this case, I don't think is necessarily very bad. It could actually mean that more people are actually going back into the job market after sitting at home and doing nothing, as they're now losing a lot of those benefits since Trump said he'll be cutting a whole bunch of that. So it's actually not necessarily a bad thing. Retail sales have also slowed, even as high-income households continue to spend, causing some big businesses such as Home Depot to report weaker than expected earnings and outlooks. Inflation has been a hot-button issue as it hovers above the Federal Reserve 2% rate target. Complicating matters, the latest report for November showed that consumer prices rose a smaller than expected 2% from a year ago. Because again, they expected it to be higher due to the fact that Trump had tariffs, and also the fact that Trump has also been pressuring a rate hike, which actually did happen. So again, they were expecting a lot worse, but it's been actually a lot better due to the fact that we've seen a lower increase in the gas price, in particular. So it's even though we've seen some levels of weakness, it's, in my opinion, it's still growing a lot stronger than what a lot of economists expected. Economists were cautious about the figure, noting that it was distorted by data collection challenges during the record 43 government shutdown that ended in November. So that is definitely true. So that could be affecting it. But still, even with that, the 4.3%, a 1% increase from what they were expecting wouldn't be that much distorted by the 43-day shutdown. It wouldn't be distorted that much. The margin of error would be higher, but it wouldn't be distorted that much. The past year's tumultuous changes in U.S. tariff policy still dire predictions about their harm on the economy were not to be borne out, said Sun, who's also president of the SS Economics and SS Economics, an economics consultancy. The scenario people talked about did not pan out. The latest GDP figures on average annual rate. The latest GDP figures put the average annual rate of economic growth at 2.5% since Trump returned to office in January. That's on par with the 2.4% pace recorded last year from former President Biden when he was still in office. So it's increased. It's on par, but it's still increased. And again, Biden's one of Biden's actual best economic years probably was the besides the economic recovery from COVID was probably last year. So it's doing better than what Biden did, even though we are seeing a better increase than what it was. The National Economic Director Kevin Hassanet echoed Trump's remarks on the newest numbers. 4.3% GDP growth is happening because of Trump's policies, but Biden's policies did things to reduce real incomes by 3,000. Hassanet, a front-runner to become the next chair of the Federal Reserve, said Tuesday on CNN. That's the kind of stuff that takes a while to repair. And if you look at 4.3% GDP number, you can see that we're repairing it at record pace. So that is definitely true. It's a lot higher. A lot of Biden's policies resulted in higher inflation, resulted in bad economic situations for the U.S. And having this growth is showing a sign of increased recovery and better signs for the U.S. So I'm incredibly optimistic, even though that there's some headwinds that possibly could be coming. I am definitely optimistic on what's happening in the economy and what's going to happen in the future, especially since Trump's policies are now cutting regulations, making it easier for businesses to invest in the U.S. And that's going to help the average American and help everyone within the economy. So this is a good sign. And 3.4% interest, not interest rate, 4.3% growth in GDP, real GDP. Let's remember discounting inflation. So 4.3% in actual GDP growth. It's a really good sign. And this is even higher than what I believe a lot of nations around the world right now. So we're doing a lot better on the international stage too. So this is a great sign for the U.S. and hopefully this continues, and I think it will. Anyway, with this good sign, I hope everyone has a good day, and I'll see you next time.